A very warm welcome, everyone. I'm Kyle MacDonald, a project leader and venture builder at BCGX, who in his prior life spent 8 years in family offices. And today I'll be your host of Simple's webinar on family office security and risk management. To those of you joining us for the first time, Simple powers the next generation of family offices through end-to-end products and services that make the family office journey straightforward. To access actionable insights and solutions from today's webinar, you can access Simple's Family Office Security and Risk Report. That's a Family Office Security and Risk Report by heading over to our website at ansimple.co or by scanning the Simple QR code in that corner over there. Joining me today on the panel, we have three esteemed guests. There's going to be a fascinating conversation that unpacks everything to do with risk and ultimately security for family offices. The first of whom is Edward Marshall. Edward is a well-known family office insider, advisor, strategist, and author. He is also the founder and CEO of Prestige Global, an intelligence-powered risk and business advisory firm. Prestige helps clients overcome complex challenges, improves performance, and manages risk, and is a trusted partner for CEOs, boards, family offices, and investors. Edward also co-leads the Ultra High Net Worth Institute's Family Office Initiatives and also co-authored the book, The Family Office, A Comprehensive Guide for Advisors, Practitioners, and Students. So we're in good hands. Next is Kate Bright. So Kate is CEO and founder of Umbra, so that's spelled UMBRA, international group, a chartered security professional, and has over 27 years of private client-facing experience in the private and family office sector. Kate is a speaker on the topic of invisible security, and under Kate's leadership, Umbra has grown into security concierge and secure lifestyle services business for private clients and family offices working across generations of international clients and families in the UK and far beyond. Welcome, Kate. And then finally, but definitely not least, is Scott Ogenbaum. I'm sure that's not the first time. Excuse my dyslexia. It'll play out throughout this session today. So Scott is a retired FBI agent and the author of The Secret to Cybersecurity, a simple plan to protect your family and businesses from cybercrime. He is a keynote speaker and a cybercrime prevention trainer, frequently appearing on major cable networks. In fact, he was just on one about 5 minutes before this call as a special contributor on cybercrime. So Scott's passion projects focuses on teaching children and seniors how to reduce their chances of becoming the next cybercrime victim. So as you can see, we have a fantastic panel today to unpack some meaningful options. If you have any questions during this fireside chat, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll try to respond to them throughout the conversation as we go. So really, the aim of today's session is about exploring this landscape, of how security and risk is playing out and how family offices should think about mitigating this. A little bit of the agenda. We're going to look at the state of risk today. We're going to be looking at areas of risk that family office should be considering, how to go about managing them, how to think about key service providers, and really the state of risk and security today and where it might be heading in the future. So perhaps without further ado, I'll sort of pass over my first question, which let's start with Kate. So if you wouldn't mind talking through some of the macro shifts that you see driving risk and security today for family offices.
Thanks, Carl, and thanks Simple team for having me on today with my esteemed colleagues. I think I always preface anything that I say within the family office community that I was sat on the other side of the table not even 10 years ago. And so I think if I look at 2013 to 2024 as the sort of the guiding principle, I was working in a single family office, and we did not at that time have the post-pandemic European-wise post-Brexit shift. And as we've already said, let's not sort of dwell on geopolitics, but the time we live in is so complex. And I think when you look at the world from the lens of things getting more dangerous, not less, you then couple that with the wealth trends that certainly I've seen since leaving the last sort of single family office that I worked in. We've got a plethora of risks that didn't exist. And I love talking about invisible security, invisible risk. And I'll leave it to Scott to talk through specifically from cyber and digital. But I think, again, going back to the former me would have dealt with things in silos, and now I think things have become a lot more complex and a lot less simple. Although I know, part of the mantra today, and not least of which the simple mantra, which is making security simple. And I think we are dealing with the macro and micro shifts that we've seen. What are you meant to do if you are the end user client? How are you meant to navigate a space that is so complex? And our Umbra 4-pillar approach tries to give some clarity in that chaos. But I think the way that we work, the way we exist, the way we travel, and the way that from a family office perspective, that's all managed, I think it's a different world to 10, even 5 years ago.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kate. And I think maybe this is a question. Let's point this one towards you, Edward. If we think about a family office, there's two sides to it. One is obviously naturally, as we hope, would be the focus, the family itself. So, family, ultra high net worth families are facing increased risk and exposure, but family offices themselves, are exposed and ultimately, prone to being targeted these days as well. How is that changing? Over to you.
Sure. I think in terms of the risks that families are facing, it's kind of a three areas that I would focus on. The first being an industry and a group that looks at families as a one-size-fits-all type of situation. The other is the nature of family offices themselves. And then there's issues with the security and risk vendor mismatch with family offices. I mean, in terms of one size fits all, I think you can't, it becomes incredibly difficult to do risk management for families with a one-stop solution or one thing that comes out of a box for them. It's got to be bespoke because the issues that they face, the vendors and the families are have to have that agreement. It's just like being able to fly an airplane. Yes, every pilot flies with a checklist, but I certainly don't want to be with the pilot that's just flying, or somebody that has a checklist and can fly that particular aircraft. So I think that's pick your analogy there, but I think that bespoke nature, I think, is something that's challenging because family offices have things in common, but families are all different for a number of reasons, multi-generational, all these other things. And family offices also have a tendency to be finite in nature. If there's a death in the family, something changes, they might not exist, versus in corporation or an investment fund or something else that has needs and risk needs that could well last past the founder or the CEO and things of that nature. Family office has to be adaptable to that. I mean, that's just some of the issues that's there. And then when you talk about the nature of family offices, what makes them risky in particular, to go back to your question, is really around it's the nature of family offices, but it's not just about the money. It's not about the wealth. I think that just focusing on the wealth portion is myopic. It's too much on the Willie Sutton effect, and not going at other issues that come up with dealing with families and family offices. There is a lack of resources that many family offices have to be able to source and staff security elements and risk and threat elements inside of them. It's not, they have outsized needs around those issues, but the affordability is not there to bring in a complete security team. So how do you find the right balance between all of that? There's a lack of and a focus on efficiency and putting out fires. Always, it doesn't matter the size of the family office. There's always a notion of feeling that you're putting out fires and looking backward instead of looking forward, and being focused on efficiency for the convenience of the principals versus effective security. And that trade-off is challenging and results in some of the issues that we see out of there. And then, just a lack of understanding of the nature of the threats, where they come from and how they're all interconnected. If you have a particular hammer in the risk or threat world, you're going to look at those. You tend to look at those, the world as those types of nails. And I think with the risks that we're seeing today, there's definitely a need for understanding to put all of those from there. And then vendors, it's a challenge for these families to pick what excellent looks like from their vendor selection. How do you pick what's good? How do you avoid the fear, doom, and gloom around risk and go from there?
Yeah. Perfect. I promise I will get on to Scott shortly, but I might ask this question to Kate. So thinking a little bit about, families today, particularly those who have family office, at a global scale. These families are global, they're multi-generational. How should they be thinking about when's the right time to begin to consider approaching managing their risk?
So, I mean, no time like the present. The number of conversations that we're having, the increasing number of conversations that start along the lines of "tell me what I don't know" is really encouraging, but it's still not enough. And I think the unknown unknowns that we face today need a risk owner within a family office to be so multi-talented and have so many different skills that, to Edward's point, you're having to outsource, insource, and work out which of the risk pillars and areas you want to actually hire in versus contract. So I think if the question is, when do you start thinking about risk? It's got, from my perspective, 90%, which is Scott. I'll let him come on to talking about, from a cybersecurity lens. 90%, 80%, majority of the things that we are dealing with in a reactive, fast state are not only expensive and stressful, but entirely mitigable. So, this idea of a proactive posture is for me, just, again, keeps it simple. And picking up on what Edward said about, he used the magic word checklist. I do believe that there is a way that, particularly as the former family office executive, you can cut through the noise of looking backwards by presenting it as a cost efficiency and also a part of business as usual. And I think if you are able to, and this is the key point, have the right vendors, I totally agree, but the right internal process, the right people managing it. I know that from personal experience, when we're working with a family office team that had this dumped on their to-do list, different kind of outcome, as opposed to where top to bottom, from principal right the way through to the family office executive, there's a real desire to tell me what I don't know, living in that growth mindset. That's where we have the best results with our clients.
Brilliant. And Scott, so many of our lives are lived so digitally these days. We kind of live in this parallel world, right? It'd be really fascinating to hear a little bit about, from the other side of the veil, how are families sort of managing this digital side of what it is that is everything to do with risk?
I think everything's been thrown on us so quickly, or that it becomes completely overwhelming. I had an amazing 30-year career with the FBI, spent the majority of my time on the investigation and response to cybercrime victimizations. And let me tell you what I've learned, and this is not from reading books, watching movies. This is living in this. After dealing with 1,000 victims, I've come up with what I call the 4 truths about cybersecurity. And we'll walk through each one, and here's what they are. None of my victims ever expected to be a victim. Why would anyone want to target me, is what I always heard time in and time again. And when I was dealing with these victims, they were always caught off guard. Now, it's one thing when it's your business, it's another thing when it's your elderly parents or your kids who were hurt, but nobody ever thought it was them. And then when I would sit with individuals and I would say to them, hey, are you taking this threat seriously? The number one response was, oh yeah, I got my IT guy handling it. And that's always really not the answer you want to hear, because what we're going to unpack is, we're looking for a magic pill for what I like to call a people problem, a business process problem. So I want you to imagine for a second that your family office has been victimized. I've seen it all: ransomware, identity theft. I just had one family member who was taken in a romance cryptocurrency scam for $5.8 million. They got him outside of the safety and security of, the infrastructure which was built within the family office. And just imagine if this happens to you. And the thing I want to tell you from a law enforcement point of view, the chances of law enforcement coming in and getting your money back, fixing the problem, I hate to say it's slim to none. there's no such thing as a magic reset button. Once the bad guys do their damage, it's very difficult to fix the problem. The next truth is even harder, that putting the bad guys in jail is even more difficult because today's threat actor is located overseas. When I was a young FBI agent, it was easy to describe what I did. Bad people did bad things to good people. I worked with state and local cops. We put bad guys in jail. What a fun and exciting job back in the day, playing cops and robbers. But today, our adversaries are located overseas. We're looking at China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, West Africa, all different, and there's a merger now between nation states and transnational criminal enterprises. Bringing the bad guys to justice is very, very challenging. Now, I know that sounds really, really depressing, but the big epiphany came for me probably about 2 years before I retired. And I realized what I call the fourth truth to cybersecurity. And that is almost 90% of what I dealt with easily could have been prevented if my end users were only armed with a couple of key pieces of information. I retired in 2018. I didn't think the problem could get any worse than it did in 2018. I was telling people it was supposed to be a $6 trillion global problem by 2021. COVID comes in. Now the problem is in the trillions of dollars. But I want to throw this question out to all of you here today. This cybercrime problem continues to get worse, but we keep throwing more and more money at the problem. What does that mean to any of you here? What does it mean when we throw money at a problem and the problem gets worse? Edward, Kate, what do you guys think?
We feel frustrated. I think the point's a really, really good one. Yeah. And I was going to actually bring and weave in value sort of at some point, because again, former family office hat on, my job as chief risk owner, was also chief value officer. And I think, let's be real about this. You're absolutely spot on, Scott. And, security has often come with a really reactive, expensive tag. And so I think as risk practitioners, we need to really reposition this whole experience for our clients to be less of a time and energy and stress and a value driven rather than value subtract process. I had a really interesting conversation with a client just recently about how to measure risk management spend. And we came on across a really interesting algorithm, if you call it that, which is how much would you spend on insurance in a family office and what is your net worth exposure? And so back to you, Scott and Edward, I think if we're looking at giving people on this webinar really practicable toolkits, what should the value proposition be? What should people be spending? And are those two metrics actually where we should be starting, as well as having an individual bespoke conversation, just as you rightly highlighted, Edward? No two family offices are the same. What do we even mean by family office? I'll leave it there.
Excellent. I might steal the mic for a sec and just sort of outline. So if we imagine, for those who perhaps are newly emerging or next gen family offices, solidifying and professionalizing what it is that they're doing, let's perhaps as a group walk through some of the typical risk types that family offices might experience. So I'm going to list a couple, but I'd love to, crowdsource a few others that come to mind, and then perhaps we'll circle back to some of those which are meaningful. So the first being, there's obviously operational and organizational risk. That is a beautiful big bucket that can cover everything from security all the way through to the way in which due diligence is carried out in a particular investment type, right? There's fraud, there's physical security, a huge one, which many, I think, take for granted, but is increasingly becoming more and more important, particularly in developing economies. There's cybersecurity, as Scott rightly mentioned. And then obviously there's this idea of reputation management. For a lot of these individuals, a lot of their value sits in their reputation, the way they hold themselves in the world, the relationships they have, and it can be very difficult to claw your way back when that reputation is tarnished. So perhaps, Edward, are there others that come to mind for you, any that you think are particularly important or relevant to bring up?
Well, I think one that kind of crosses a lot of the areas that you mentioned, but has the human element that both Scott and Kate talked about that I think is critical is looking at how family offices are implementing insider risk programs. Now, insider risk does not always have to mean some sort of a malicious actor. These can also be actors that make mistakes and unintentional. An insider is just somebody that has access to your assets, your property, your information, whatever it is that gives them this privileged point of access to you. It could be somebody that is supporting an estate for a family. It could be a CEO of your family offices, vendors, suppliers. It doesn't matter. But the issues that we've seen is there is a lack of focus that's come out in data, that's come out in anecdotal conversations, and I'm sure Scott and Kate have seen that as well. There's a lot of good work that's done on the front end of getting an understanding of who those individuals are that you're going to bring into a family office, but sometimes those things fall down. You'd be amazed at the amount of access that some people have to a family on a daily basis, a housekeeper or something like that, and families don't even know the last name of that individual, right? So there's a lot of areas that you can do to protect the family, but also create a nice environment for everybody working there where there's shared risk ownership around insider threat. It doesn't have to be a top-down, scary thing around there, but you can get some resilience around that. And especially when you're thinking about the war for family office talent, that's a critical piece too. When you have new people coming into the family office, what are you doing from there? And then you're broadening your insider threat program. We're doing that front end test, but how are we evaluating 2 or 3 years later? People's circumstances change. And it's not just about a criminal thing that may come up there, but the various circumstances will change in a person's issue. You can see that in government examples where people turn into spies for another country. But you can also see it in terms of malicious or sometimes even unintentional behavior for families. So I would say insider threat is one of those areas that I think bears a lot of work, but it doesn't cost. It doesn't have the resource spend that I think a lot of families think it does, and doesn't have to be this all-encompassing, scary model.
Yeah, and I think so accurate around this idea of even just potential negligence, right? A lot of family offices have this sort of standard operating procedure, particularly when families are around or in residence. How easy is it for that routine and rhythm that is being passed from housekeeper to butler or to investment manager on a regular basis? How does that then begin to kind of play out, and how susceptible is that? Kate, perhaps any others that we haven't covered that you think would be really relevant to highlight or discuss?
Yeah, I think this idea of a live risk register has never been more important. And I spoke about the 4 pillars before. I think I would add and underscore Edward's sort of people-centric approach. The amount of family officers we talk to when we're helping them to recruit don't have a background checking, vetting, screening protocol in place. There's some really low-hanging fruit and easy, quick wins. I think one of the pillars of our 4 pillars that I would really love people to, and I make no apology for using this as a mantra, is emotional security of that 4th pillar: physical, digital, reputational, emotional. Your need to build risk resilient people starts with the teams that are handling information, data, reputation. They are the gatekeepers to these individuals, and gatekeepers in the positive ring fencing protective sense. I think for me, there's the pandemic has given the risk management community the opportunity to put health and safety right at the forefront of a family office agenda. And I think the best examples of families that we work with are when not only they're at a family and a principal level, the physical, mental, and cognitive well-being and risk resilience and sort of states of fear mitigated on a continuum, but also that of their teams as well. And so I think there are family office corporates like any other. Any corporate business, small, medium size enterprise, family office included, that isn't investing in the emotional security of their teams is missing a trick, because security has to be people-centric.
Yeah. Scott, anything in the wonderful world of digital and cyber that perhaps it'd be good to double click on before we dive in?
Yeah, there's really 2 things that I really want to drive home here right now. First of all, what I see in a number of my clients when they become victimized and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe we got taken in a very sophisticated breach. It's because they didn't secure all their remote access with something called two-factor authentication. So for anyone who's out here listening to me today, if you do not have a second form of authentication on your email, the cyber criminals are going to get into your system. They're going to read all of your emails, and they are going to trick you through social engineering. Those are the two things. The first is two-factor authentication. I've been talking about this since 2008. And the other one is social engineering. And the other question that I'm going to ask out there is, how well is your family office trained to spot social engineering attacks? And when you tell me that you have a platform that does phishing security, remember, phishing is only a small part of social engineering. And social engineering is tricking us into doing something we normally wouldn't do, either through email, through text messages, through telephone calls, through social media, account takeovers, pop-ups. These are the things that I'm seeing that are occurring all the time across the board. Either if you're a family office, a small business, a major Fortune 500 company, these are the issues that everyone is still dealing with. And, you know, the response that I get is someone just drops something because I go, hey, what's your strategy? And they go, hey, we got this great firewall. And I go, well, that's a pretty nice control, but that's not a strategy. So, you know, and as I try to unpack a couple of these through the things, those are two main points that none of my victims had. They couldn't identify social engineering, and they didn't use two-factor authentication. And when my clients come to me and they say, look, we don't want to do it, I'm like, I don't care. Just make sure that you have a good intrusion response company on standby, because, you know, even to support what Kate and Edward are saying, look, we can't live in the world of reaction. We have to be proactive in our approach. And I know I'm oversimplifying things when I'm saying, I mean, we do need to invest in technologies, but if you don't do these simple, basic things, it doesn't matter what technologies you have in place.
Yeah. Brilliant. So maybe shifting gear, we've heard a little bit about the state of risk today, the types of risks that family offices and those they serve are exposed to. Perhaps we should talk a little bit more about how to manage these risks in effective ways. So maybe, again, sort of starting with yourself, Kate, you know, what are some of the practices where you've seen family offices really get started on this journey of managing risk? So imagine a world in which I am a family office approaching you for the first time, you know, coming to a liquidity event, and I'm thinking about stepping into the world of how do I get started? What should I consider?
First, I'd say congratulations for finding us as a navigation service in the risk management, sometimes with complex risk management sector. You know, Umbra's approach is soaked in insider family office experience, and so for me, the proactive outreach is fantastic. And I think this idea of being able to pick up the phone to somebody, to your point, Scott, when things haven't gone wrong, to have a proportionate risk partner that isn't engaged in any commercial way, but that can just have a conversation with you. And some of the best most long-term enduring relationships that we have, other than the families that I worked with on the client side, are simply where we're happy to have conversations in what are, you've quite rightly said, sort of positive, upbeat moments, liquidity events, succession planning, you know, all these wonderful phrases that we hear that actually are change events, and where change occurs, risk follows. And so I think this idea of sitting down and wargaming. And one of the things I think I would bring into this is, and one of the approaches that we've found most successful, is when we have all of the advisory village partners around that table. We often say that risk management used to have a sort of a stool kind of hurriedly put up at that table. Well, now I think we deserve to have a place at that table: tax, trust, wealth, investment, legal, all of these partners around the table looking at a client's life, secure lifestyle, taking the words out, taking the security risk, stripping it out and putting in a protocol, a strategy, to your point, Scott, having a plan, and then looking at it from a value perspective. I make no apology for looking at it from a value perspective, because that is where most people will end up stopping, when they don't actually look at where that spend can be sat across, and when, crucially, to bring that risk in-house, when you should be recruiting your own CTO, when you should have your own data management in-house, as opposed to, Scott, the ubiquitous, I've got my IT company. Who are they? When did you last test them? Let's do some fun, exercises around testing our assumptions. And so the best conversations we have with clients, where we walk through a very simple checklist that we have, our Secure Lifestyle checklist, and starting to have a conversation with a client, because we don't know what their perception of their own risk is. One of the key pieces of the last 4 years for us has been the conversation around how safe do you feel? And that is a perception-based question. And the answers to that, I've sat with some of the most impressive individuals that have come through the other side of wealth events, who feel very unsafe, and unsafe in a way that is a holistic strategy only can help them in that instance. So yeah, proactive. I think we're going to be there's a mantra here: simple and proactive.
Love it. I guess maybe this one's for you, Edward. Where have you seen examples where family offices, began engaging in trying to manage their risk, and actually they've just gone about it completely the wrong way?
I don't know if completely the wrong way, but I think there's probably ways that you can find more efficiencies as part of it, because it comes down to a couple fundamental factors. Bad actors only have to be right once. You have to try to think about what a world would look like for you to have 100% success rate. Is that always going to happen? Absolutely not. Anybody who promises you that is living in some sort of a theoretical bubble. So I think that illusion is important. We've talked about this as well, is that families can be victims of their own success. There's this survivorship bias around, if something hasn't happened to me in the past, or bad hasn't happened to me in the past, then it's not going to happen to me in the future. I'm off the radar. Nobody knows who we are. I mean, these are biases that are very natural. Everyone wants to look at flood insurance after the flood. And that becomes some big issues that come out of it. And you're always heads down into, fixing the problem that's there. So when we look at an issue from there, and I would say this is a pretty universal thing, risks are changing. They're getting, I wouldn't say more complex, but it's just changing, right? Rockefeller, very sophisticated family office, a long time ago, they didn't have to think about social media presence of their children, but they had risks that they had to deal with. 3 years ago, if you asked anybody about drones and executive protection, they probably would have said, that's a minimal threat. Look at what the Russia's war and invasion in Ukraine has done in terms of drone threats for there, and the edge cases that have come out of there. How are we going to protect against the traditional ways that we've done executive protection with those issues that come out of there, let alone threats of physical issues from drones, but cybersecurity threats from drones, surveillance from drones, and other things in there. And how is that affordable? How many families can afford to put those things into place? But I think when you look at it holistically, what I always say is to think about, we look at a risk matrix evaluation. So we take the 10 domains of risk that we see, and then we have this universal model that fits. And then we build it for that particular family that comes across all of those issues. And it becomes a heat map. It becomes an ability for them to actually score themselves, project management. I mean, one of those, as Kate mentioned before, one of those critical issues is in empowering that chief get stuff done officer in your family office to actually go get that area done on risk. And I think this creates an opportunity for families as they're putting it together. And then lastly, if something goes wrong, or you're preparing for when something goes wrong, have something simple enough to be able to use. People ask me, what's the best technology for X, Y, and Z? Or what's the best it's the one that you're actually going to use. So if you have a process around when there's a crisis or something happen, pick something simple. We have a 5-question thing that we always tell people to think about. Ask yourself 5 questions when you're faced with a crisis, a breach, a privacy issue, or whatever it may be. Number 1 is, who am I? What's your mission? What have we lost? What do we have yet to lose? And what are we missing? If you answer those 5 questions, whether you're in a boardroom for a large multinational company or a family office that's just getting started and something bad happens, it's going to give you a lot of answers and can prepare you for what you need to do next.
Yeah. We've had a great question come through in the chat. So is there any sort of evaluation or checklist, maybe it's even principles, that someone should begin to think about when starting to assess their cybersecurity as a family office? This one over you, Scott.
Yeah. Well, I just want to jump into one thing, Edward, that you said. We sit here, we plan, but I forgot the great poet. Oh, it was Mike Tyson who said the plan is only as good as the plan until you get punched in the mouth. And so often that's why, having the plan and rehearsing the plan and going through these things is so important. And the one takeaway that I want to jump on with what Edward was saying is, look, they're going after the family. They're going after social media. So they're mapping all of this out, and it doesn't matter your net worth. They're still able to go after the weakest link here, and it's the lack of sophistication that is required. For me, I've created a really simple framework that I will send to you all to connect with me. And really, if I had to boil it down to go over it at a really high level, it's really this. It's understanding that we can't keep the problem gets worse. We keep throwing money at the problem. Okay. When I was with the FBI, I said, we're not going to arrest our way out of the problem. We have to realize the 4 truths of cybersecurity. Edward hit on one of them. Nobody expects to be a victim. No one's going to target me. Bad guys steal your stuff. You're not getting it back. Putting the bad guys in jail is really, really hard. That really makes us feel hopeless. It makes us feel vulnerable. But a majority of it could be prevented. So what if I had like a minute to go back in time and sit with my victims? Social engineering, number 1 tool in the cyber criminals tool belt. There's 7 or 8 different disciplines that you really have to be aware of. There's different scams. You have to realize it's an account compromise. Today, all the bad guys need to do is steal your username and password. We are no longer keeping our information in a locked file cabinet within our family offices. I'm going to ask all of you, how many different cloud-based platforms are you using that have sensitive information? I do this with Fortune 500 companies. It's impossible for them to figure it out. Make sure we're not using the same password for mission-critical platforms. Use a password manager or a strategy to be able to do that. Use 2-factor authentication on all bits of remote access. And then think about that. And even if you do all of those things, your third parties aren't. So when you get the email from somebody you know and somebody you trust, and there's no malware in the email, and they say, hey, we need you to send a wire transfer, what are you going to do? What's your policies in place? Do you have policies? Those simple things that I haven't more formalized. And this is a strategy that anyone can pick up, anyone can implement, and it really doesn't cost you a thing.
Perfect. Kate also has a point on this, which I'd love to pick your brain on. You mentioned a bit of a checklist earlier, so perhaps there's something you could lean into here.
Yeah, so I think that there's just one thing to add on from my sort of generalist side of the house. The 4-pillar approach when it pertains to digital risk is not forgetting that the bleed between physical and digital, and just the link between the two. Again, we sort of go back to this idea of a people-centric approach. But I just wanted to touch on one thing to add to what Scott has brilliantly given as a really good immediate sort of, you will stop something happening to your infrastructure by doing what he's just said. Something I'm noticing here in the UK and to a certain extent between family offices in terms of investment is this idea of accreditations in cyber. And so Cyber Essentials, Cyber Essentials Plus here in the UK is actually a really good framework that you can use to test your IT systems. And anecdotally now, more of our family office clients are using that as a benchmark with which to actually even interact, if not invest, with other family offices. So I think this idea of becoming more of a corporate approach to risk and looking at where, as a family office ecosystem, you can really test your standards and actually pin your standards to ones that are out there. And I'm not sure if there's a similar version in the US, Scott, but I'm pretty sure that things like the National Cybersecurity Center's board cyber toolkit is also really good for anyone struggling with it at a governance level too. Those are two really, really useful frameworks that we've used.
The only things those aren't really covering, and I agree with you, is just the attacks we're seeing on the end users, the attacks we're seeing on the families, on our kids, the sextortion, what we're seeing towards our senior members. You know, we can secure the network with tools, but we can't secure the end user without some kind of awareness. And to be honest with you, very few of us want to go sit down. And I mean, I build training for companies, and no matter how good you can provide training, just think about it. Nobody really wants to sit down and do an hour training on the threat of social engineering.
Particularly a 15-year-old next gen.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the challenge that's the challenge we all face. It's not easy.
Yeah. I think there's only a matter of time before it becomes more sophisticated, more targeted, and AI driven. But that is a topic for the end of this conversation. Perhaps shifting gear again onto thinking a little bit more about service providers as a whole. So if you are a family office today, you know, what type of service providers can and should a family office consider to try and support them in their journey towards being more conscious and secure when it comes to their risk and security? Ed, maybe over to you. It'd be great to get a bit of the lay of the land for some of the considerations they should be taking in.
Well, I think there is a disconnect of people that look at risk and risk vendors and family offices that we talked about at the beginning of our conversation. And I think that needs to be addressed. Sometimes there's a language barrier. There's a lot of jargon that's used in that industry. And how do you translate that for somebody that's not, deeply focused on this particular area of risk, whether it's legal, regulatory, cyber, political, or privacy or reputationally managed? That becomes an issue as you're looking at how you're building out your different vendors that are there, and families just not understanding what's available to them as a result, or what's affordable. You will look at risk management and think it's some extravagant expense that you have to build your own intelligence agency to be able to go do this internally. And with the right expertise and the right partnerships, the right communities of other family offices that are looking at this issue, there's ways to do it that are quite reasonable on the resources, and don't give you what you commonly see with families on this is the illusion of security. It looks good. It looks good on paper as part of it. I think the other issue that you'll see with providers in there is you really want to look for people that have expertise in their area. It is very challenging to do all of these things and have expertise in all of these different areas, geographically, functionally, or whatever it may be. And it's a natural thing for a lot of providers all across the family office spectrum to have the scope creep issue. If you put $500 million on the table, every provider is going to come up and say that they can do absolutely everything. And that's an issue that you need to face, and families need to be ready for that. And vendors and suppliers and advisors of the same ilk is be prepared to know and provide the services that are compatible to what families are looking for as part of it. Other implementations is you can do a lot of things as a service, right? Bringing in a physical executive protection team for a family office is an incredibly expensive endeavor, complex, filled with all different issues around HR and that people have to face around that. But if you need things and need areas of that, if you're traveling to an area that requires heightened security for whatever the reason may be, I think there's ways to do it and to work with people where you can have that that ability without having somebody in-house full-time. So I think the last thing I'll leave you with is that all the different domains that we've talked about today, health, privacy, reputation, operations, technology, they all interact. And if you're not focusing on them in an area and watching how they interact for your particular family and your situation, you're just going to be playing whack-a-mole. And that's just going to introduce new issues for you as part of it.
Yeah. Kate, I'd actually be quite interested to hear a little bit more about, I guess, some of the service models, obviously the service models that you offer, but also the service models that you see in the market. Yeah, it'd be great to hear that.
Yeah, so I think Edward picks up a really valid point. This idea of mission scope creep. I think for us, the first point of call, and if we go back to the word simple, is helping our clients navigate. And that's based on a conversation. So what are we helping our clients to navigate through? And a really deep understanding of what they're facing. I think the way you can really amplify that is how quickly you can build trust with the individual that you're talking to. And certainly for us, being able to introduce clients to other clients, not only does it give that sense of reassurance, but also between them, they can whether it's at principal level or family office exec level, they can actually start to answer some of the questions in slow time and actually look at the difference between their individual secure lifestyle aspirations and what actually might be proportional. And I think that's our job as risk management professionals, is to bring that proportionality back, but also put the value in. I make, as I said, no apology about talking about value, because I was the one that was the sort of chief fire hose, but also the one that had to pay the bills and explain the bills at the end of the day. So, and I think just that a final point on in-house versus contract, I think the amount of people who we speak to who have no idea of the different ways that you can manage risk, both in-house and also contracted. For a family office at a certain time in their wealth journey, it may be entirely inappropriate to own people risk. For others, that might be exactly what they need to do in terms of scale and succession, and again, just like any corporate. So I think when to in-house, when to contract, but also when to have your in-house humans. To Edward's other point, talent is the big issue. Who do we have as the people in our organization, in our family office organizations that are owning those different risk areas? Are they equipped? Are they the people who are going to guide you through to this next phase of your family office succession liquidity event? So for us at Umbra, again, 4-pillar approach, walking through a conversation with our clients and being able to connect them with other clients that have gone through or who have maybe the similar sort of same worries about the things that they may have on their horizon.
Yeah, and I think again, it'd be good to, and I'll sort of throw the ball back at you, Kate, around this idea of right sizing. The support you need. How should a family office begin to think about right sizing that type of support?
You mean in terms of this sort of advisory village community around them?
Correct. Yeah.
I'd take you back to, I think I said earlier, the work that we do, particularly when it's coming at us red hot. One of the first questions we'll ask our clients is, who is your advisory village? Who is the wider community? I think risk management needs to work in parallel with legal, tax, trust, wealth, all of the different people and practitioners who are protecting wealth, protecting reputation. And I think I'd finish with this idea of the family office reputation being as fragile as any large corporate brand. And that is something that is hard fought, hard earned, particularly in multi-generational dynastic families, and so easy to pull apart. So I think we need to look at what we're trying to protect, how we're trying to protect it, and who, wider than the risk management community, we as practitioners need to look in order to protect the advice we're giving and make sure that's ring-fenced in a really robust way.
Yeah, perfect. So maybe, Ed, I'll throw this ball back to you. So if I think of a family office today, beginning to embark on this risk management journey, and they're thinking to themselves, I'm going to have to develop and form this new relationship with an outside entity. I'm going to have to welcome them in. and I'm going to have to figure out how to sort of prepare for this new relationship. What are some of the things that a family office could expect, and how might they sort of prepare their teams?
So if the question's about how you prepare it, like an outside risk advisor to come in and look at it. Well, listen, any kind of time you bring a new relationship into a family office, or a high net worth individual, or any kind of closely held business, there's always a bit of potential consternation, because there's a especially family offices, a hyper focus on privacy. We live in a world where privacy is eroding. You can think of it as a privacy recession or depression, depending on your mood for that particular day. So now you're introducing another element into the family office that they have to be thinking about. Is this person or this team going to be, how are they going to be looking at these issues? Are they going to be looking at these issues from a perspective of enhancing our ability to function and be efficient? Or is this going to be just a focus on, like, hey, you want to be 100% secure, don't use your phone, don't use your emails, turn off everything, and then go live in the woods, which is just not acceptable for family offices. I think there's a good point of families working with different communities and organizations. Certainly, Simple is one of them, where you have the ability for other families to say what their experiences are working with an individual like that, or a firm, or a group of individuals around your risk threat, or whatever issues come up with supplier selection for a family office. There is value in that network effect. And then the last one, family office is one of the loneliest jobs out in the world, because you've got to keep everything private. So your ability to network with other families and share what's worked, what hasn't, who's been helpful, who hasn't. There are few substitutes for that as you're looking at all this. But listen, don't be afraid to ask for advice on this issue. You're not filing your own taxes. You're paying experts to do this, and so there is a benefit to this approach, and it's a healthy checkup to do for families on a number of occasions.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, I'm going to sort of wrap up with our final sort of section, and maybe one question to you, Scott, and then I'll ask a broader question to the group. How are you sort of feeling about the wonderful world of AI, and how that's reshaping, cybersecurity today?
A lot of great stuff going on in the world of AI. But once it gets into the hands of these cyber criminals, they're able to do an amazing amount of reconnaissance. They're able to go over and do social media scraping. They're able to find out every single thing about you. In the old days when I was an FBI agent, it was easy. I had an unlisted phone number in the US. And when you had an unlisted phone number, nobody knew where you were. They couldn't find you. But today, everything is available online. We're providing way too much information about ourselves, on our privacy settings on social media. We're telling people, hey, look at me, I'm out of the country. And now with AI, we're able to craft perfect social engineering responses through emails, text messages, telephone calls, account takeovers through social media that look absolutely perfect. And who's falling for this? A lot of young people. I see that there was one question there, talking about how do you not scare the kids? And, we have to really have these conversations. It's not easy. There's no easy button. There's no easy button to believe that's going to solve this. It's having those communications with every member within the family to do that. And it's only going to get worse, because now we have so many other different platforms being used. I hate to say it. 66% of the population is using the same passwords for mission critical accounts. So the bad guy gets access to the Facebook account, and from there gets access to the iCloud account, gets access to all the pictures. So these simple things that we all really need to take, and that's why I call it the cyber secure mindset. It is not a one and done situation. It's not a check the box. We did our 30 minutes worth of cybersecurity awareness training, so we're going to be okay. And the worst thing too is I don't think we could really wait to see if insurance is going to solve this problem. Because I don't care how much insurance you have. When your kid's the victim of sextortion, there's not enough money to fix that problem. And remember, a lot of this sounds harsh, but if 90% of it could be prevented, just follow these simple steps.
Yeah. Brilliant. So final question to each of you, one sentence answers. What is it that gets you up and excited about sort of this space today? If you were sort of saying this to a family office. So maybe I'll give you a second to think. 3, 2, 1. Ed, over to you. What gets you excited about this space?
Well, listen, the big risks are evolve from newer and advances of convenience and technology. Artificial intelligence, is one that's bandied about. The fear of deep fakes and other things that come out of that. But the exciting thing is that all of these tools and advances can be used on the offense to protect yourself. And I think that's something too, is don't live in the fear, doom, and gloom. There's a lot better ways to do that, and to not exist in a state where you're accepting the unexpected, but you're expecting the unexpected.
Brilliant. Scott, sort of one sentence, what gets you excited about this space?
Cybercrime. You have the ability to reduce your chances of becoming the next cybercrime victim. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll send you that strategy document. It's just that simple.
Brilliant. Kate, what gets you excited about this space?
Well, true to my surname, I'm glass 3/4 full and relentlessly positive that a proactive posture can really save the day. But I think in a world of unknown unknowns, let's control the controllables, right? The secure lifestyle checklist is there for a reason. Hit me up for that. But also security as a service. This is ongoing subscription model revenue that needs to be invested in a holistic security strategy. And we think we've got that with our Umbra Plus methodology. So yeah, happy to chat. No cost, anytime.
Excellent. Thank you so much to everyone today. And thank you to all the viewers. Thank you for joining today's webinar on family office security and risk management. If you would like to learn more, you can log in or sign up to the complimentary account to reach all that is the wonderful platform Simple. You can read 2024's Family Office Security and Risk Management Report, available at simple.co, or you can scan this little QR code over here. With your account, you can connect directly with Simple's team and the network of experts like myself and everyone on the panel today, and further explore a broad array of guides, tools, data, services across the Simple platform. So stay tuned for our next upcoming webinar, which will be on family office recruitment. So thank you so much for joining. That's it from me.